Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. Today I have with me in the studio a colleague from the Cordele area. He is just does some amazing things, and he has a very interesting story. We started chatting once we met probably about a few months ago, and I said, Rob, I have to have you on the show so that you can share that all things are certainly possible. He is none other than Chief Rob Rodriguez, Cordele Police Department.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure. You and I always enjoy chatting with you, and we're working on a couple projects with Albany State University. But and during the course of one of our conversations, you were telling me about your academic path and how it led up to your current role, and I was like, that's amazing. Yeah. So share with our viewers the inspiration. You were a non-traditional student, where you went to school, and what you're currently doing right now.
Okay. Well, when I was in high school, I went to high school here in Albany at Albany High School, and I was a mediocre student at best. Wasn't my full potential, of course. However, I was too cool for school, and I wanted to do all the things that young men wanted to do, and I didn't put any effort into school, and I barely got through school with some mediocre C's. Didn't even take the PSAT or the SAT or any of those things. I was like, college is for people that don't have any talents or any gifts. Therefore, I'm not that individual.
You don't fit in that category.
So I graduated high school and I joined the military at a high school, and because that's what I was going to do and that's where I was going to be. And I joined the Marine Corps, and I'm in the Marine Corps, and I got into law enforcement. And after my stint in the Marine Corps, I came back to Albany and went to work for the Albany Police Department. And when I got here, the culture at the time was college education really didn't have a place in law enforcement. Now, although that was misinformation, the senior officers had been here at that point 20 years. None of them had formalized education. So they were telling their new officers, you don't need college, you just need to keep your head down, don't get in trouble, go to school, professional education, and if you do that, your work ethic and product will carry you to wherever you need to go. And as I started to go and I started to progress in my career, I noticed that some folks were coming into the industry with college education, and they were moving a little bit faster. And I was a strong, a diehard, deep in the woods opponent to college education. And as a matter of fact, a former professor here, Dr. Marlene Ramsey, worked at the police department, and we would have these intense arguments about a pro and con. Why is it good to have a college education? And I was very adamant. A piece of paper on the wall is not going to make me a better police officer. And I had worked with some people that had college education that I thought were somewhat substandard to at least my level. So I was like, I ain't going to college. I don't care. You can't pay me to go to college. Well, after doing almost 15 years at the police department in Albany, I decided this time for a change, and a former supervisor was now the chief in Moultrie, and he says, why don't you come down here? I could use somebody with some experience. And so I go down to Moultrie, and I'm there, and I'm expecting just to walk in the door and like a boss, just run the thing. And I walk in the door, and there's younger guys than me and gals, and they've got education, and they're in these things, and I said, I went to him one day and I was like, boss, I said, I can't do this. I think I'm just going to find something else to do. I said, I'm too old to be taking direction from a 22, 23-year-old individual. And he says, you want me to tell you what your problem is? And I was like, sure, tell me. And his office, the chief has a luxury. A lot of chiefs have like a private restroom in their office or close by. He says, go into my bathroom and look in the mirror. And so I got up and I went in there, and he says, who do you see in the mirror? And I said, me. And he says, you are your own problem. And he says, until you figure out that you have so much more potential, you could do so many things, but until you get over being pompous and arrogant and recognize that you can learn some more, he said, you're never going to be anywhere.
Very candid conversation.
Yeah. So I was a gut punch.
Yes.
This is somebody I knew for 20 years
Sure.
is telling me all these negative things. And so it did not really hit me, and I didn't realize what he was saying at that moment. And I went home, complained to my wife, I can't believe the chief said, so and so and so. And I don't know where or when or how or why. I really don't, other than I can only attribute it to divine intervention. At some point shortly thereafter, it just hit me.
Kind of resonated, yeah.
I am my own problem. I'm the one that controls the circumstances.
Indeed.
So I started doing some research, and everybody, and it didn't make a difference whether it was law enforcement, higher education, business management, any position where I felt like I should be at, all of those positions required not only an undergraduate level degree, but some of them were requiring graduate level, advanced degrees. And I was like, come on, really? You mean I've been getting it wrong this whole time? And I was like, okay, all right, fine. So as a, typical men do, we procrastinate about everything. So I started doing research, and this was about 2011, about January 11. I started doing research, and I was like, even though I live in Albany, it was too hard for me to come back to Albany to come to class, whether it was at that time Darton or now Albany State, because from Moultrie the time. But Thomas University in Thomasville was closer, and my chief says, I will let you go during the day when you're working. And I didn't know how profound that was at the time, that he was trying to develop me, trying to mold me into the person that I am today. So I hem-hawed around, and I had all the classic excuses. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. My social platform is just so full that I can't engage in that. And I had children, and I had all these things. But I finally just said, it's time for me to be an adult and do what I need to do and go to school. So I started the process in 2011, doing the financial aid application and getting all the transcripts and everything. And I started January 2012. I think it was the 5th or 12th. The first week is when the semester started, and I was a fish out of water. I mean, the average. I was 40 years old, and my nearest student colleague was like 23, 24,
right.
And they had they were talking about Snapchat and Kik and all these other things, and I'm like, I just want to pass English. How do I write this paper? That's all I care about, so, but I was under the gun. I felt like I was under the gun because I was like, I don't have 6 years to do a 4-year degree. Right. I have to move forward. And Thomas University is a small liberal arts university. It's got really good programs, but I chose the law enforcement program because I just assumed that would be the easiest for me to do, and subsequently found out it was the most challenging because I am a practitioner.
Sure.
And so I got involved in, immediately jumped in, and I realized, well, I got to do this fast. So I started taking 6 and 7 classes a semester. Wow. Now, bear in mind, I was working full time.
Still family obligations.
I had the boss at the house. The wife was telling me all these things to do. I still had all the civic and church and children to take care of. So, and at the time, law enforcement officers, contrary to popular belief, do not make a lot of money.
That's correct.
So I couldn't afford internet at my house. You'd think that's crazy when you went in today. Oh, everybody's got internet.
Right.
So, and I didn't have a laptop. So the chief says, you can borrow a laptop. He says, you can use the
eliminated all excuses.
Yeah,
for
you can use the city's internet. So what I did was, I would come, in addition to going to class, I would come to work an hour early and do homework, I would work till my lunch hour, and instead of going to lunch, I would do work. And when I got done after work, I'd spend another hour. And on Saturdays and Sundays, which I happen to be an avid golfer, I had to give up golfing. And I can remember sitting in the Starbucks at Meredith for, from about 8 to about 1 every Saturday and Sunday, knee deep in research papers and essay questions and all these different things. And and it was really hard for me because the logical part of my brain was like, why am I worrying about Dolly's painting of time? It has nothing to do with what I do for a living.
Yes.
And but I suffered through it, and I did that. I ended up doing 2 years of school in 1 year.
1 year.
And so that December I graduated.
Outstanding.
With an associate's. And I stayed on to do I took a humanities course and a biology course because I knew I was going to transfer. I wanted to get my my undergraduate from a different school. And although I'm a diehard University of Georgia football fan, I thought, well, I'll go to Florida State because they have one of the best criminal justice programs online. However, with out-of-state tuition and other fees, it was a little cost prohibitive. So I did, I spent a lot of time doing research. And in addition to that, I found Wilmington University, which is in Newcastle, Delaware. And of course, I couldn't drive to Newcastle, Delaware I had to do the online
option.
And which was just as challenging because the courses were just jam-packed with the information. So I completed my last 2 years in 3 semesters there. So when I finished my bachelor's, I think that's when it really hit me because I graduated with my associates with a 3.67, and I was like, so it's 3.67. I didn't understand the magnitude, how other people view your grade point average as it applies to not only the academic world, but as well as the professional world. People look at that. And when I graduated from Wilmington, I graduated summa cum laude, and I graduated with 3.83, and I was like, okay, I think, I'm the boss, I'm doing something, But what I learned before we talk about my master's, and I think this is the important part, and I tell people every day, number one, I'm 180 degrees the opposite direction. I am a strong proponent of education. And if I can get anybody, I don't care if you go to tech school, 2-year institution, a 4-year institution, go to school. I'm no smarter than you, Wendy, but what I learned in my associate and my undergraduate level is critical thinking. I learned that I used to think I was just this prolific writer, and I realized very quickly when I took English 101 that I had no idea how to write but that's what I like to do now. I like to write. So I said, well, I'm not going to stop there. I've got my bachelor's. So I enrolled at Columbus State University, and they have a resident program there that specifically focuses on public safety administration, a master's in public safety. And what makes the program so unique is you do the whole semester in 1 week. You show up on a Sunday and you leave on a Friday.
Wow.
Now, you think about it in terms of your own experience in graduate school, all of that into 1 week. And it was a couple of weeks prior to the class, you had all these reading assignments. And then a week before you had to submit a research paper. The week that you're there, not only do you have to study, so you're going to class from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 or 7 o'clock.
Very comprehensive.
You're going through that whole week. You have to do research, we're talking about 15-page research papers on the topic or the class that you're there. And then you have to do one when you leave. And then the test was, I tell you, I was envisioning the Scantron and the whole 9 yards. No, it didn't work that way. These are graduate level courses, so everything was written essay, and it was very intense, very intense.
It sounds like it.
And you would go every other month. There were 7 core classes, and and then 5 electives. So it's designed to be a 2-year program.
Sure.
You could do it quicker, but by design, you start with a class and you finish. So I recently finished my master's, and I found out how much I didn't know about myself through this. I graduated with a 4.0.
Okay.
There's only 10 out of all of the fall graduation, all the Columbus State University students, from associates to doctoral degrees, that had a 4.0.
So now you're a history maker.
I was a
I
trendsetter.
love that. Rob, you brought up so many interesting points that I certainly want us to cover and to highlight. And one is just making up your mind. There's always going to be reasons why we feel like we can't do it. We don't have time. We have so many obligations or commitments. But we get in the mindset of just staying in the immediate and not realizing what the long-term gains will be as a result of those decisions. So your life still continued, you still had the family commitments, you still had to go to work, but you still made it happen. And I'm one of those people that when you speak and start that process, but certainly when you speak it into the universe, it just starts unfolding. We have to give certainly some credit to your employer, because he saw the potential in you and said that I'm not going to be the roadblock. I'm not going to tell you why you can't do it or put any obstacles in your way to prevent you from doing that. If it's internet, we'll make that accessible to you.
Yeah.
If it's time, I'll make you. And I love that, particularly when it comes to employers. You're going to get that. You're going to get a return on that investment, and it's going to play out in the workforce. So hats off for him seeing that. I know, based upon what you shared with me and what you're doing in Cordele, you have then taken that baton and you are now doing that with your employees.
Exactly right. You hit on a good point. And what he said to me, I'm sure I heard it 1,000 times. I don't know why it resonated with me this time. I said, but Chief, 4 years to get a degree, yada, yada, yada. And he says, but Rob, 4 years are going to come or go either way.
Absolutely. I love that.
He said,
it's going to happen.
Yeah, he said, 4 years from now, you're going to say, man, I wish I would have started. So, and I tell people, the biggest obstacle to go into starting anything, particularly in formalized education, is getting over the fear that you can be successful. Just start.
Sure.
If you can just enroll, just talk to the admissions advisors, you'll be surprised how smooth the process is.
Right.
Because like Albany State employees, I don't know how many people, that's all they do all day long is to talk to people and say, okay, this is what you need for here. This is the documents you need to get there. If you have any problems, we'll take you to the website. We'll do whatever.
Right.
I mean, institutions all over this country have a myriad of staff that's all that they do.
That's their role.
So the thing for us and the challenge for me as somebody that was given an opportunity, it's now my obligation to now pass that information on to somebody else, not just as the chief of police, but just as a human. You know, I've got a young lady that works for me, and she's been at the department almost 20 years. She's in her 50s, and she says, I'm going to go get a degree just because I want one.
I love that.
You know,
I love that.
And she's all the same reasons. I got children. I'm scared. I'm nervous. What if I don't, I don't recognize what I'm supposed to do or realize this or that. And I said, but that's the whole thing. That's the beauty of it. It's a learning.
It's a learning and a discovery process, right?
Yeah, and
I don't want to miss this point, Rob, because this really impressed me when you shared it. And so these degree pursuits and accomplishments have afforded you the opportunity. You are now chief of police of the city of Cordele's police department. And you said when you got there, you made some discoveries that you had employees, you had personnel, your staff, and they were lacking in having earned degrees. That the culture was get a high school diploma, and certainly the day-to-day experience is what will then sustain you. But you said you made the discovery very quickly that in many ways, and these are my words, you were doing a disservice to the greater community. That because there was a lack of education and growth outside of those parameters of Cordele, that you could not then advance that community. So you start encouraging, and you are still doing that, encouraging your officers to go back to school. And the part that I loved is you said that we need to be able to connect with the constituents and the citizens of this community.
Yeah.
And the way in which you do that is that you continue to learn and develop. And so sociology classes then become important that you take. The psychology classes become important that you take, so that we can fully understand, meet them where they are, and then help them to advance. Elaborate a little bit about that.
A lot of people don't recognize, or it doesn't come to the forefront of their mind. Law enforcement affects everything in your life, primarily economic impact in your community. If the crime rate is really, really high, or you have officers that are not doing what they need to be doing or not doing stuff, then that affects the economic growth of the community. Businesses start leaving, poverty starts to rise, and then that's not a good situation for anybody. But more importantly, what do we do? We interact with people. This is a people job.
Sure.
So where is the best place to engage people? And that's in an environment where you two can grow together. If you and I are in a classroom together and you've had negative experiences with law enforcement or other government officials, but me and you have to work on this biology project, and we're working together and studying together and doing things, then I'm no longer the man or the police or 12 or whatever the words that the current culture is. I'm just Rob, and we're working on this. I have a family. I've got friends. We may have mutual friends. And it breaks down that barrier. And more importantly, by making sure that by affording my officers the opportunity to increase their education, they're not only going to provide a better service to the community, but they won't. It's involuntary. They are going to do the same thing I am. They're going to go in the community and say, "Hey, you need to go to school."
Right.
Even if it's the technical college, even if it's a theology school, if that's what you want. Anything to increase your level of knowledge is going to benefit the community. It's going to benefit their families. You know, my employees think I'm crazy because I say, I want you to leave me. I want you to get so much education, get so much experience that this is too small for you,
right,
that you have to go somewhere else, whether it's in law enforcement or out of law enforcement.
Absolutely, because that degree will follow you. It's education at the end of the day. It will always be with you. And one of the beauty of education is, as you alluded to earlier, is once you start the process of learning, you realize there is so much to be learned and that you do not know. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one thing that I found, and that's why I told you at the beginning, I thought, well, I'll just get in criminal justice. I'll get my criminal justice degree because I'm a cop. I've been a cop for, forever and a day, and that'll be easy. But once I started actually learning criminal justice and the theories and the applications behind it and the history, I was like, I didn't know all of that. And now that has impacted how I police.
Sure.
How I respond to the community. And that was just mind-blowing to me, because I was thinking it's just all cops and robbers. You hook them up, put them in jail, and the story. But law enforcement is so much more than that.
It is.
So it's just, my wife always, she gives me a bunch of junk. She said, 2 years ago you couldn't stay in college. Now you want to be a college professor.
And you will, and that's a great segue. And that is coming to fruition very soon. And so I'm excited. You and I are will be joining forces within the next couple weeks, and going out, teaming up, and sharing with Crisp and Dooley and all of those surrounding counties about our Cordele campus. And we're going to bring the criminal justice. Thank you, Dr. Ochi. We'll have a presence in Cordele. So we're super excited about that. And you will be providing the instruction there.
I will. And I think it's so relevant in our community, our world today, because when you look at the national narrative of this country, it centers around the perception of injustice of law enforcement, and there is a certain certain segment of any industry. Law enforcement we do a really good job, and we go through this painstaking process to try to hire the best qualified
Yes.
candidate. Unfortunately, even with every strainer, every measure that we have to catch the bad apples, every once in a while one will slip through, and it's the same in any other
industry. Absolutely.
So one of the reasons that I want to get involved in teaching criminal justice is simply this. Before somebody makes an opinion or forms an opinion or gets on a platform and says so and so and so and so and so is wrong or this or that, let's give you the education, and then you can become a part of the solution to fix the problem.
Yes.
If there's a problem, instead of just complaining about it. Like, I'll give you I used to complain all the time. I didn't make any money. I couldn't advance. It wasn't until I got involved and realized that I had a part in this. Mm-hmm. So, getting involved with the different organizations, the different groups, and working with them is only going to help this country. It's only going to help our communities. It's going to help us. I mean, unfortunately, there's two folds about that is, one, law enforcement does not do a good enough job of highlighting the good things that we do. Out of all the negative things that have happened in law enforcement in the past 5 years, those are just not even a % of all the other, million of law enforcement are going on. But when we do mess up, we need to say, hey, we messed this up, sorry, we're going to fix it, and we deal with it. And I tell the people in Cordele, and I tell my officers, we are our community. It's not there's no separation. And that's true for law enforcement throughout this country.
Yes.
So, everybody says that it takes a village to raise a child. My question is, what happens when the child's raised? Where does the village go? The village is still there, and they're still impacting that person throughout their lifespan. And guess what happens? Then that person becomes a part of the village that's raising the next generation.
Excellent point.
So it's our job, at least I feel as a community servant, to provide my community with the tools and at least the opportunity to make the best decision that's going to help not only Cordele but Albany, New York, Valdosta, California, wherever.
Well, you certainly have exemplified this. I don't know that I've shared this with you, but I served on the Cordele Chamber of Commerce. And my very first meeting is when I learned of Rob Rodriguez. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was Monica Simmons. And I'm not sure, something major had occurred. And I think it was before the actual storms that had come through. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, when she said your name, I looked at the faces around. I observe a lot, and everybody's face lit up. And it was in the context of he's just more than just a police chief. He is entrenched and committed to the community. So her next statement was, and so he has already offered his services. It's just a matter of letting him know what needs to be done, and he or his officers will avail themselves. And it was more than just your normal shift and the service of protecting the community.
Yeah, so but that's what we do.
Yes.
I mean, I'll tell you. You want to know the real reason I got in law enforcement? It's embarrassing, but I'll tell you. Because chicks dig guys in uniform. That's why I got in this business. And when I got into the business, when I got into it, I found out that it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
It's bigger than just me. And, my wife is a law enforcement officer, mm-hmm. and, we say these things. You'll hear law enforcement officers say, oh, I'm in this business because I want to help people, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And so my thing is, let's actually do that.
Yes. And
it took me a long time to get to where I am. And when I look at it, or I look at the dichotomy of my whole professional career, going through those, I like to call law enforcement puberty years, that learning, hitting my head, trying to grow. And then when you add that, with the education, then you reach where you are. And, I don't claim to be an intelligent man, but I tell my officers is, I have this phrase, and it's actually painted on the wall inside the police department, and it says simply this: expectations plus accountability will equal professionalism.
I love that.
And how I equate that is to our conversation here about education is we're expected to do these certain things, but education holds us accountable because it tells us what's right and what's wrong.
That's excellent.
And then when you have that accountability, you can be professional, because I do this with my officers. I say, give me a definition of professionalism. And they'll say, well, it's when you're professional. And I'm like, no. Tell me what professionalism is. And a lot of folks can't really give you Webster's definition. So I don't know. Here's the definition that I apply, and this is the ethos of the department in Cordele is, we're going to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons and in the right manner. If we do that, then we will be a true professional in the sense.
That transcends any industry.
Yeah.
Any industry. So we'll have to bring you on for part 2. But I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm excited about what you've been doing for Crisp County, particularly for Cordele, and in particular what you'll be doing for Albany State University. You exemplify so many different areas of life, but the ones that I find synonymous with Rob Rodriguez is commitment and determination and just focus. And so you speak it and then follow through with it. That anything is achievable if that's what you desire. And so I'm sure that is attributed or key elements of your success, and it's very contagious. So I know you will continue to do great things. Thank you for all that you continue, as I said, exemplify, and that you desire to be. We just had another segment prior to yours, and we were just talking about the importance of sowing into others. And so you do that so generously with all those individuals that you come in contact with. So I'm excited about your future. And so the education will not stop. You're going to be starting on a doctoral degree in the very near future.
I am.
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to do when I finish here. My wife says you're only allowed one doctorate. She said you can't get two. So, but I'm scared and nervous, but I'm just going to do what I've been doing.
Absolutely.
Just hit it one time, one class at a time.
There you go.
Keep going, and then next thing you know, I'll be finished with that.
We'll be calling you doctor in addition to chief. Rob, it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Know that you're always welcome back to tell us the great things that you'll be doing, and then we'll have to bring you back to talk about the program.
I will.
Okay.
I will. Thank
very
you.
good. You're welcome. Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and we will see you next time.